Hello photographer, welcome back to my channel. It's Belinda and this is where we talk all about photography, from inspiration to camera techniques to editing skills so that you could take better photos. In many photography communities, I see that photographers are generally very interested in learning about the thought process that goes behind photos. And so this video serves as a mini case study based on a series of street shots that I did in Hong Kong as the city recovers from COVID-19. Specifically, I'm gonna break it down to you what went into my head when I took some of these shots. I'm not just gonna recall what happened, but I'm actually gonna invite you to join me on a street shoot, a virtual one. So in so doing, you will be able to see what I was seeing when I took these shots, and I'm going to share with you some sneaky techniques that I often incorporate in order to catch these candid moments, because I shoot in this documentary style of street photography. And finally, we are going to do some edits together, and so you will see the entire production cycle in my street photography. Are you excited? Of course you are! Okay, let's dive right in. For those of you who are interested, these photos are shot on my Minolta AF5000, which is a film camera paired with a Minolta 50mm, essentially the Nifty 50. On my right hand, I was shooting on my Minolta, working on the compositions and all that. And on my left, I was shooting on this camera, which is Sony A7 Mark II. I was filming my perspective on my left at the same time while I shot these photos. So let's start with my favorite photo of the day. As I walked around the community, I realized that a lot of old people are interested in buying watches. This was a pattern that I found quite interesting. I was like, okay, I didn't know this. I got interested, and then I saw their reflection on the glass, which made for a perfect composition, so I just took the shot. This second shot was taken on Garden Street, I believe, or was it Goldfish Street? I remember there were some goldfish. Anyway, I forgot where exactly it was, but basically I was walking alongside the street hawkers selling street food. Bam! Immediately, I recognized this familiar composition that I always love doing, which is framing in a frame. So in simple words, framing is a photography technique in which you create something in the foreground that circles up the subject that you intend the viewer to look at. That is framing. What I mean by framing in a frame essentially means double framing. So in this setting, I noticed that there will be two layers of framing. The first layer, which is the outermost layer, would be the people waiting for their food. The second layer, which is the inner layer of framing, would be the store itself, the posters, the food that is being displayed. And the ultimate place I want my viewer to look at, which is the subject, would be the people in the store making the food. Next up, I was crossing the streets when I came into this scenario in which an elderly couple was looking at some goldfish together on the street. And I thought to myself, that looks so cute. I'm so gonna capture them. What I did was that I walked past them like nothing happened, and after a few seconds I turned back and then captured them. Now, based on my experience, I knew that under such set of circumstances, the thing that I should not do is to try to walk up and capture them straight off. The shot I had in mind was a candid moment type of shot in which they are just doing their own thing, remaining as is. That is why I would not want to disturb the scene. This sums up my approach when it comes to candid frames. First thing, I pretend to be interested in something else, and secondly, I buy time for myself, which is a few seconds, to sort out all the camera settings and to make sure that I am at a correct position in relation to the subject based on the focal length that I'm shooting on. Thirdly, when I am sufficiently confident that I will get the shot, I then turn back and just get the shot. Now, a few seconds might sound pathetically short for some of you, but honestly, if you know your camera settings well enough, that is more than you need in order to do all the calculations in the back of your head that will allow you to get the shot. On a side note, this also goes on to explain as to why you want to be familiar with shooting on manual, because you only have one shot and you don't want your camera to mess it up for you by shooting on auto. For those of you who are new to my channel, I do write extensively about photography techniques, specifically in relation to shooting manual on streets. I do have an article breaking down for you how I come up with my settings. So if that's what you're interested in, check out the link in the description below. Next up, we have a shot of a random old guy sitting at the footsteps outside a store. In Hong Kong, we currently have a law making it mandatory for everyone to wear a face mask in public areas, including outdoors. But he wasn't apparently, and I thought it would be interesting to me to capture him for documentary purposes. The story is though, as soon as I fired the shutter, he noticed me and he was so pissed that he shouted at me. And he wanted me to show him what I took of him. But I was shooting on film. The point I'm trying to make here is that I didn't choose the 50mm lens for no reason. As I shot this photo, I was standing already at the edge of the walkway. If I go anywhere beyond 50mm, say an 85mm, I will have to stand in a driveway where the cars are rushing by. I don't want to get myself killed basically, and so that is why I cannot go any further than 50. On the other end though, when it comes to shooting street photography in Hong Kong, I feel like it's not very practical for you to shoot using a wide angle lens. So say you're shooting on a 24mm, you will have to be really close to the subject for it to fill the frame sufficiently, and that could be quite challenging. It really is a cultural thing, but I can tell you that Hong Kong people are not cool in general about being on camera. When it comes to our faces, our bodies, our identity, Asian cultures seem to be reserved about this. People can find it offensive. Based on geographical and cultural characteristics of Hong Kong, I tend to find 50mm as the best street shoot lens. Alright, so after a few hours, my film photos got developed, and together we are now going to look at how I edit my photos. This is a photo that I really like, and I think it really represents local, authentic Hong Kong. There are two main things that I did to this photo. Firstly, it's a framing. Again, it is an example of how I bring frames in frames. The first frame would be the red van itself. The second frame would be the window of the red van through which we can see the green van. I wanted to make it clear to the reader that this is a framing that I was going for. That's why I have to crop out the parts that are not serving this purpose. The second tweak that I did to this photo is the color grading. This roll of film was a Kodak 400. I actually like having some green in my photos, especially in the shadow areas. But in my opinion, the green in this series of photos is a bit too much, and it can look amateurish. So what I did was that I decreased the green, which essentially means increasing the magenta. I think this brings the image closer to what it is like in real life. Next up, we have a photo shot from an overhead footbridge showing the bed, I believe, of a homeless person juxtaposed against the busy streets in Mongkok. There are two things that I try to do in my editing. Firstly is to increase the brightness contrast, and secondly, increase the color contrast. When I saw this spot, this really shows one of the paradoxes in Hong Kong, in which homelessness is very real in such an affluent city like Hong Kong. So in my editing, I wanted to flesh this out via firstly creating a contrast between the brightness level of the foreground and the background. Secondly, doing the same in relation to color contrast. I wanted to keep the foreground relatively darker and increasing the brightness of the background. I also tried to increase the saturation of the colors in the background on the streets, whereas decreasing the saturation, mainly the greens and the magentas, in the foreground. So this really is what guides my decision in tweaking the colors and the brightness in this photo. As I'm finishing out with retouching the JPEG files from my film developer, I realized one thing that film does magically to my photography. It massively increases the proportion of photos that I am happy with out of all the photos I've taken, which is 36 shots. Based on this experience, I feel like shooting film, especially on streets of Hong Kong, is a very good way to improve your photography. It basically pushes the photographer to achieve a better balance between shooting and thinking. Do you think so? I 100% think so. If you haven't already, hit like, subscribe, hit the bell as well, because this helps my YouTube channel massively. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!